real pleasure for me to be in Worcester, Massachusetts this evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always an honor to be invited to a masjid to talk about what is an extraordinary journey that in fact all of us go on. Often sisters will come up to me and say, "You're lucky, you're the chosen ones. When you're picked from another faith and you're given Islam, you've been chosen for Islam." But you know what that's forgetting? That you were chosen for Islam, you were given it by birth, but you have to re-find it. It was introduced into your lives by your parents, inshallah, but then you are on your own journey. So please, everyone here, come with me on my personal journey tonight, but please let us all remember our own journeys and the signposts that Allah gives us all when He's calling us to behave in a way that is respectful to Islam. So I guess the big question I'm here to answer tonight is, how on earth does a Western journalist related to Tony Blair, who co-hosted the invasion of Iraq, come to be standing before you in a hijab as a Muslimah? Well, alhamdulillah, I have to say, there is not one of you sitting in this room tonight who is more surprised than I am at this turn of events. Because this was not in what I laughingly call my life plan. But they plan, we plan, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best planner of all. So when people ask me, what was your journey to Islam? I had to really look back. Because I didn't know I was on a journey to Islam until I became a Muslim. But I've had a think now. And I'll take you on some of the steps that I see as having been signposts to being here today. I grew up in North London in the 1970s in a secular Christian household. An active father and a mother who had been a model and stayed at home and would never dream of going to church. I suppose you'd call my mother a superstitious Christian. So she would hang crosses around to ward off evil spirits. And my father would sing Catholic songs when he was drunk that were his reminders about Catholicism. But into that was born a child who, like every child, knew that there was one God. Because I have to tell you, I can't remember a time when I didn't know that in my life, the order of command went, my father, my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother, and above them was God. And my children, today are showing me that same. Because we are all born in Islam. But in the secular Christian Europe of yesterday and today, somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been pushed to the corner of the universe and made into a rather sad byproduct of creation rather than the creator. It's almost as if once upon a time God did this amazing thing. He created the universe, but since then, He's just been hanging around waiting for us to recognize that. Kind of a second album deal, but the second album never happened. This is how we grow up in Western secular society, seeing God. One of our most famous philosophers from Germany said, God is dead when we killed Him. So no surprises then. But when I was growing up as a teenager, I too lost respect for God. He lost me, I lost Him. But only today have I realized that He was always there with me, for me. So I went on the usual journey. I took drugs, I drank, I went out with boys, and I became the master of my own universe. My ego, my nafs, controlled everything I did. If I had a success at college, it was because I was the smartest girl there. If somebody said that I looked attractive, It was because I made myself look attractive. And that was very, very important to me then. And I was mapping out my future. Do you want to hear what my future plan was, just to show you how laughable it is to make such plans? I was going to be a Hollywood actress. That was my overall dream. Although just being an actress really was my dream. And what did I know about Islam growing up? Well, you know, before 9/11, I think Muslims must have been hiding in society. Because where was all the fearsome activity? There wasn't any. The Muslims in Britain, as today, were going about their business, so I only knew 3 things about Islam until 9/11. Gleaned from the 3 girls I met at school. And I observed them from the age of 11 to 16. And I found out that number 1, Muslim girls are very good at maths. Maths and science, what's the deal? We used to look at them with envy going, how come they're in all the top classes? We didn't see the hard work that went into it, of course. Number 2, I found out that Muslim girls did not have boyfriends. Oh, no way. That wasn't going to happen. And number 3, they all had long hair. There was actually one other thing that came on a bit later on. I suspected, like most of my generation, that Islam was some kind of Asian cult, that you had to eat curry, you had to dress in a certain strange way, and it was nothing whatever to do with God, Moses, and Jesus. Because that was ours, and Islam was for them. So what were the turning points? What was the beginning? Well, we're painted as terrorists, as frightening people. And so, growing up in Britain, after 9/11, you come to fear Islam. You become to suspect the other. But just before that, in the year 2000, I began to suspect that there was another story here. For many of you, you may be old enough to remember a picture from the 60s that changed the world. It was a photograph of a young girl with napalm on her back, running from her burning village and screaming. Now the American people, in fact the world, looked at that photo and it helped end a terrible, stupid, pointless war. Well, in the year 2000, I was sitting on my sofa and I saw another photo come up on the BBC News. And this photograph was of a young boy called Faris O'Day. Faris O'Day was 15 years old, and he had a stone in his hand, and he was from Rafah refugee camp. And he stood with such strength, his back arched, as an Israeli tank bore down on him. And that young man's body seemed to say, "You will not come into my refugee camp and kill my sisters and my aunties and my mother. No, not today. You will not come in today." But what did the BBC say about this boy's bravery? The bravery, by the way, of Tiananmen Square that we applauded. The bicyclists against the oppressive tanks. The BBC told me, "Look at that dreadful Arab urchin throwing stones at those friendly Israeli tanks." Friendly tanks, Arab betrayers. Something in me had to look further into it. Or was it something in me? I'll let you judge. And then came 9/11. Oh, by the way, Faris O'Day was killed. Less than a week after that photograph was taken, an Israeli sniper shot him in the neck. That's what they do with boys with stones in the occupied territories. So then came 9/11. I remember, like many of us, watching the planes crashing into the Twin Towers. And after the shock and horror and sickness of that had passed, a clear thought came into my head, and it was this: which poor people in the world are going to be made to pay for this? Because already many of us outside the Muslim community suspected that it wouldn't be the perpetrators who would pay for this, but it would be someone part of a greater colonial, controlling imperialist plan. And very quickly, Afghanistan came into the fray, and we watched the bombs falling there and then Iraq. Well, in 2005, with that photograph of Faris Ode still on my mind, I went into my editor. I was working for the Mail on Sunday at the time, writing columns. And I asked him to go to Palestine to report on the elections happening there. Now, I have to tell you that there was no reason whatsoever for him to send me to Palestine. I'd never been to a war zone, I'd never written about the occupation. Do you know what? I didn't even know it rained in Palestine. That's how little I knew. But something in me, or something outside me, was telling me, go to Palestine. And I don't know, maybe Allah intervened with my editor, or he just wanted to get rid of me. I'm not sure to this day which it was. But he signed off on a check and said, yes, go and report on the elections. And so it was that on a rainy January day of 2005, I found myself at Tel Aviv airport about to have my first interaction with Muslims. Occupied, oppressed Muslims. My driver, I just got out and I got a mini cab, taxi, was Jimmy. Call me Jimmy, he said. His real name is Jamal. He's Palestinian. And between Tel Aviv and the first checkpoint at Ramallah, he gave me a kind of class, Occupation 101. I'll never forget driving towards Ramallah through the beautiful rolling hills of Palestine on a bumpy road, a road that gets bumpier the less Jews live in the area. And I said to Jamal, I don't mean to disrespect you, brother, but there's a beautiful road up there. It's like a golf course. It's so smooth. Why don't we use that road? Why are we on this old thing? And Jamal said to me, you don't know much about this, do you? That's a Jews only road. I can never ever go on that road because it leads to a settlement and beyond. But my taxes pay for that road because I come from Jerusalem. When we got to the checkpoint, it was interesting because a kid from New York in an Israeli uniform pointed a gun into the car at Jamal and demanded our passports, his papers, my passport. And when he saw that mine was British, he said, hey, Britain, we love you guys. I have to tell you, it didn't make me feel particularly proud. And it wasn't until the next day, when I woke up in the occupied West Bank, that I realized that I had at least a mild dose of Islamophobia, or Arabophobia perhaps. Because that day I was taken around by Mahmoud Abbas's personal guard. And I have to tell you that being in a car racing through streets with big Arab men with guns just reminds you of all the bad news footage. At one point, I was taken in a metal elevator up one story to meet Mahmoud Abbas. They sealed the door. Two big men with guns stood either side of me, and one of them, I'm about to do a very bad Arabic impersonation. Please don't be offended, brothers and sisters. It's relevant. His walkie-talkie went, and he said something that sounded like, and all I heard in my head was, we'll kill the white woman later. It's true. I thought, I've seen this movie and it doesn't end well for the British person. I had Islamophobia and I didn't even know it. But you know what? It only took 72 hours in Palestine for everything that I thought I knew about the history of Europe and of the Middle East, and everything I knew about Islam to be thrown